Hey everyone, I'm back with another video, basically another how-to. This one is going to be on bent over rows. I'm going to be showing you with just a normal bar. I'm only going to use 100 pounds because I'm just trying to show you, and that's what I have on the floor here. So to start off, there are a few things to know. If you're trying to go heavier, your form is going to be weaker. That goes kind of without saying. If you watched my video most recently on powerlifting versus bodybuilding, when it comes to bench press, with powerlifting, everything was about using as much muscle on your body to drive force into the bar. And with bodybuilding, it was to isolate. When it comes to doing bent over rows, I personally think that it's really important to do more isolation because, for example, a lot of people, when they're doing bent over rows, will essentially jerk it upwards. And when you do that, you're not using as much back force and as much of your lat and your rear delt as you should be. You're obviously, using momentum and your body weight to move the bar, which isn't exactly conducive to muscle growth if that is your goal. Now, the other thing is doing that style of trying to essentially, I guess you could say bro lift, isn't good for injury prevention. It can cause a lot of problems. So that's why it's a good idea not to do that, especially in strength training or even for hypertrophy training. It doesn't really matter. Hypertrophy meaning muscle growth, strength meaning prioritizing how strong the muscles are versus how big they look. A good example would be the difference between the two would be like strongmen and powerlifting would probably be more on the side of prioritizing strength, while bodybuilding would be prioritizing muscle growth. I would argue strongman's sort of in the middle because you want to weigh a lot to move a lot of heavy implements since it's not a standard sort of bar movement when it comes to a lot of things like truck pulls and stuff like that. So another thing to keep in mind is the type of grip you're using. There's underhand grip when you go like this, and then there's overhand grip, obviously where your knuckles are facing forward. You would never want to do an alternating grip with a back pull. That would be horrible. It would cause a lot of muscle imbalances. That would make basically no sense. You could argue that for the deadlift, but definitely not for a back pull, or bent over row, I should say. Now, when you're doing an underhand grip like this, one thing that you're going to notice is I'm using a lot more of my bicep bringing it up, if you can see. But if I'm using my if I'm going forward more, I feel as though I'm using a lot more of my back. Usually people can feel the difference. The main reason is because with this one, your bicep is being pushed forward and being isolated when you're pulling. Now, it's not as pronounced when you have your knuckles facing forward versus facing you. So, another key point is, I'm just going to show you with my knuckles facing forward for a bent over row, is you want to keep your back straight. You don't want to overarch it, and you don't want to underarch it or roll it. Both of those are really bad for your spine. You want to make sure your core is nice and tight. You want to try and flex it and keep it inwards. And you don't want it to, be hanging out. You don't want it to be loose. You also, like I said, don't want to be tightening it the wrong way and going too tight by rolling in your back. So when you're holding the weight, you want to make sure that you are very bent over. You don't want to be to the point where you're essentially touching the ground as if you were doing an RDL or a deadlift, and you definitely don't want to be up here as if you were trying to do an upright row. Those are not going to be conducive to building the lat and rear delt. As well as the traps, that's a synergist for the movement. It's not the primary mover, however. So a good example of a rep would be nice bent over like this and pull, coming up to your lower chest. For me, it always ends up at my ribs, but it's probably more conducive to strength and size if you can get it to your upper chest. And as you're seeing, I'm not isolating my biceps, My elbows are getting back, they're not flaring forward, they're not flaring in too hard either. And so that is the style I like. However, you don't have to use the style with knuckles facing forward. You can use the style where your knuckles are facing you. With this one, like I said, you're going to be using the bar, or you're going to be using your biceps a lot more to lift the bar. It will still give you a lot of isolation in your lat and your rear delt, as well as your traps, but I would argue that knuckles forward would give you a lot more isolation for your rear delt, your lat, and a lot more for your trap. Obviously, there's also the other variation of doing bent over row, which would be like, for example, this is just 90. For example, you can also do rotating bent over row. So let's say you don't have a normal lat pullover machine or a lat pull down machine. By having a dumbbell, you can essentially mimic the movement. So you can have it straight forward and come up. Now, this might be a little too heavy for me to demonstrate very well. Oh, actually, no, that's not bad. But if you notice my back, it's still nice and flat. I'm pulling up and going back. Like I said, knuckles forward, and you can rotate it as you come up. So those are a few good tips for making sure that you're doing correct form. Another really good thing is if you notice yourself bouncing too much or your back lifting too much, you can always sit your butt right on a wall and bend over. And that way you don't bounce back as much when you're lifting. You need to make sure that you're always up against that wall with your rear end. So let me show you again with the single arm. You want to make sure again, knuckles forward and pull, and you're going up to the mid chest again, like the lower chest, sorry. Knuckles forward, rotate the arm as it goes up, and pull. Like I said, that one was only 90, the other one was only 100. So not exactly a workout. However, I am breathing pretty hard. But those are two different variations you can do on bent over row. And for these two exercises, you want to remember the primary mover is always going to be your lat. Your lat is the muscle that comes down on your sides. People call it the wings for bodybuilding. And the synergists are basically going to be every muscle of the upper back. So it's going to be your trap, it's going to be your rear delt, and obviously your bicep is definitely a synergist in this movement. Now, when I say synergist, that just means they're aiding in the movement of pulling, while the primary mover is going to be the lat of pulling. And yeah, that's pretty much it for bent over rows. I hope you guys like it. Leave a comment on what you want to see next on the channel. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And I'll see you in the next one.